Hello and welcome. This is Dennis Westman, your instructor for CIS 2723 Spreadsheet Applications. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about Excel Tutorial 1. Now the way we're going to usually work through these tutorials with regards to the video is that I would like you to go ahead and take your textbook out and just follow along with me as I highlight some important points covering the chapter. Now I'm not going to go through every single page, every single item in the chapter, but I'm simply going to highlight some important items that I feel like you need to be especially aware of as you work through the tutorial. And as I said, this is Excel Tutorial 1 and it begins on your textbook on page EX1. Now the way, again, I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be looking at my textbook as well. So I'm going to look down here, probably refer to some places, and then I'm going to come back to you and then make some comments and everything. So hopefully this is not too distracting. I've done this for multiple years this way and usually I get pretty good response out of it. Now again, what we're going to do first is going to look at your textbook, and as you can see, this is the Excel 2010 Microsoft Office textbook, and we're going to look at Excel page 1. Now, this tutorial actually talks a little bit about just getting started with Microsoft Excel, and it's broken up into two parts, section 1.1 and 1.2. And really this is to help familiarize yourself with the Microsoft Excel program. Now, if you look at Excel pages 2 and 3, this actually talks about and gives you a visual overview of the Microsoft Excel window. Now, if you look at the document, or the two pages, you'll kind of see across the very top you're going to have a ribbon that's going to have various tabs, and then you're going to have some options on each one of those ribbons. Now below that you're going to have your formula bar, and over on the left hand side you're going to have numbers that are actually going to be your row numbers, and across the top you're going to have your column headings, which will be A, B, C, and D. So one thing that the textbook, and this being Excel, will reference a lot of is cell references. And anytime you see a cell reference, you're to look at the column first, which would be A, B, C, D, E, and then the numbers over on the left hand side. Column and numbers. So if I ask you to go to cell reference A3, you look for A, and then you move over to row 3. And then you just go down and find that particular cell reference. Now you'll also see down towards the bottom, you'll see some sheet tabs down at the very bottom. By default, Excel has 3 sheets, sheet 1, sheet 2, and sheet 3. And then over on the lower right hand side, you're going to see some places for different views, including being able to zoom in and zoom out. So that pretty much covers the basic Excel window. The ribbon across the top, and then you have the various options, then you have the formula bar, and then over on the left hand side you have the row numbers. Across the top below the formula bar you have the column headings. Over on the lower left hand corner you have the sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 worksheet tabs, and over on the lower right hand corner you have the area where it's talking about zooming in and zooming out. Now if you'll turn with me to page Excel 4, and I'm just going to say page 4 since you know this is Excel. There's the definition for spreadsheet. I would pay special attention to that because you're probably going to see that later on. But since this is spreadsheet applications, you'll definitely need to make sure you're familiar with the definition of what a spreadsheet is. Now, for this particular section in your textbook, I've asked you to complete the various items in the yellow boxes. And so you'll see over on the far right hand side on Excel page 5, you'll see the first box, which actually looks like this. And so when I've asked you to complete the yellow or tan boxes, I wasn't really sure what color, sort of looks yellowish tan to me. When I've asked you to complete that, I'm asking you to complete these sections in your textbook. And so be sure to follow those directions, and I've tried to make that clear in the assignment area, but you'll also see that listed or discussed here in the video as well. So you're going to complete the yellow boxes, and I'm not going to go over all those steps, but you can see how to actually start Excel and perform some other functions. Now if you look on page Excel 6, you'll see some different ways that you can navigate through the program, and essentially what that means is being able to use the arrow keys, enter, home, those kinds of keys to navigate through. I would encourage you to look at that because that can certainly make your life easier when it comes to navigating through the Microsoft Excel program. And let's continue on, and page 8 talks a little bit about planning a workbook and how you might want to organize the information that's listed on the workbook, so you can pay attention to page 8. Page 9 actually has some pretty key information as far as the different types of items that worksheet cells can contain. You can have text data, which is any combination of letters and numbers and so on, or you can have a text string, which is just simply text characters like a name or something. And then you have number data, which is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And then you have some date and time kind of data. But it's going to be very important because certain data displays certain ways within Microsoft Excel. So carefully read through that whenever you are entering the various bits of information for your assignments through the semester. And continuing on, page 10, page 11 has some additional steps you'll be doing in the yellow box. If you look at page 11, there's something called autocomplete, and that's kind of nice because what it does, it helps to make entering repetitive text easier, because essentially it remembers what you've typed ahead of time and then allows you to quickly complete that. So that is autocomplete. Now looking at page 12 and 13, it's just giving you some information about how to enter dates. Pay attention to that. And then on page 13, it's talking a little bit about entering numbers. So you want to look a little bit over that. So we've got dates, and then we've talked a little bit about entering numbers, all of which, of course, you can enter into Microsoft Excel. The pages 14 and 15 just give some additional information, some yellow boxes that you'll be completing. And then page 15 talks a little bit about working with rows and columns, including changing the column width and the row height. Definitely want to pay attention to that because a lot of your assignments throughout the entire course ask you to go ahead and complete those kinds of kinds of activities. And continuing on, again, 16 and 17 talks about adjusting the row and height. Page 18 talks about how to insert a row or a column. And then page 20 talks a little bit about actually deleting a row or a column. And then finally on page 21 you finish up that first section, and then if you look at the bottom of page 21, there are some key questions that will really help you not only to know whether or not you understand that section, but you might see those later on when it comes to test time. So you definitely want to look at those quick check questions and be able to answer those. So I just want to point out at this point in time that does finish the section 1.1, and we're going to move on to section 1.2. You can, of course, at this point, if you needed to review, you could pause the video, rewind it, go back and watch it again as we move through it. That's the great thing about video, being able to pause, rewind, and play again your instructor. Now moving on to the second part of Excel Tutorial 1, there is a visual overview of how to enter data and structure a spreadsheet. That's on pages 22 and 23 in your textbook. And then page 24 begins talking about cells and range references, and again, pay careful attention to the cell references and the range references. A cell reference is simply an intersection of a row and a column. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was saying if you wanted to go to cell reference A3, you would go to column A and then you would go down to row 3. If you wanted to, let's say, select everything from A3 through D3, you would find column A and row 3, which would be the cell reference, and you would move over to D3. So A3 through D3. That is actually what's called in your textbook a range reference, and that is on page 24. So you might want to read through a little bit of that to better understand, because your textbook asks a lot of times for you to be able to go in and select a different type of reference. Now continuing on, there's some additional items as far as moving and copying a range. Those are on pages 26 and 27. And then you have inserting and deleting a range. Those are on pages 28 and 29. Now, let's talk a little bit about page 30, which begins our discussions on formulas. Now, right now we've really just talked about Excel as entering in dates and text and numbers, but not really doing anything with it. And so page 30 begins our discussions on actually entering formulas. And if you look at page 30, first of all, it defines what various parts of a formula are, including operators and arithmetic functions. And essentially what these are, operators are combining different values and resulting in a single value, and then the arithmetic functions or operators are actually like the plus, the minus, the division, and the multiplication symbol. Those are those various operators. And if you look at the bottom of that page, which is on page 30, it gives you the basic Excel operators, and then it gives you some examples on how they're used on page 31. This is really kind of basic math. You're already familiar with plus, minus, divide, subtract, those kinds of things. And so this is just kind of a review for the section in Excel. Continuing on to page 32 and 33, this is just some practice on actually having you enter in the formulas. Again, as part of your assignment for this week will be to complete the items in the yellow boxes. And so this is where you'll actually be reading and working through the various assignments. Copying and pasting formulas and functions, that's kind of nice. That's talked about on page 33. So you don't have to copy, or so that you don't have to manually type the Excel formulas. You're able to copy and paste those, and it's very, very handy, very helpful in saving time. Now, if you look at page 34, that begins our discussion on functions. Now, functions are just a quick way to perform a certain type of activity without having to manually enter those in. And I think the book uses one example is the sum function. And if you look at the bottom of page 34, you can see instead of entering in all of those A1 plus A2 plus A3 plus A4 plus A5, they simply enter in the function equal sign symbol, equal sign sum, and in parentheses A1 through A10, close parentheses. And that actually adds all of those items together, but you don't have to manually type in A1 plus A2 plus A3 plus A4 plus A5 plus A6 and so on. Very, very handy being able to use those functions. That's talked about on page 34, and then 35 also talks about some additional types of functions, including averages, count, minimum, maximum, and so on. 36 gives you some additional information about the auto sum feature. And again, at any point, if you want to pause this, feel free to go ahead and do that so that you can take a moment to review or rewind me a little bit to look back at those functions and maybe read it and then watch this again to see that it make sure that it makes sense for you. Now, page 37 talks a little bit about working with worksheets. And remember how I was talking about earlier in the video how down in the lower left-hand corner of the Excel window you have Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. Those are called worksheets, and oftentimes you'll use multiple worksheets whenever you're working on a particular activity, project, assignment, those sorts of things. And so this is just talking about how you can actually go in and insert and delete various worksheets. That's on page 38 and 39 as well. And then, of course, and page 40 also talks about redoing and undoing particular actions. That's always handy just in case you make a mistake. And then 41 talks about finding and replacing. And then 43 talks a little bit about previewing and printing a workbook. Now, let me make this clear for the class. This is an online class, and since this is an online class, I'm not asking you to print anything. Again, please do not print anything. Everything that you turn in to me is turned in electronically through Blackboard. So again, please do not print anything because I won't accept it. Everything you need to do is done through Microsoft Excel, turned in through Blackboard. I grade it and return it electronically back to you. Shouldn't ever be anything that's printed for us. But if you should be at a point where you need to print outside of the class, pages 43 and I believe 44 talk about printing. Well, and continuing on, 45 also talks about printing. So I would definitely pay attention to those sections because you will have to answer some questions about them on the test. But again, you will not have to print activities for this particular course. All of it is done online. Now, as I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or post them to the discussion board. And if you need to rewatch this video again, that's the beauty of an online class. The beauty of having a video is being able to simply pause and rewind and rewatch a particular item that you feel is most important. So please do that. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you and have a great day.